I thanked my grandfather for the $300 check. He stopped carving. The turkey looked me straight in the eye and said, "The gift I wired you was $500,000. The silence that followed was deafening, but not as loud as the sound of my sister Tasha dropping her wine glass onto the white tablecloth. Before I explain how a simple family dinner turned into a crime scene investigation, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who finally bit back. My name is Maya, 32 years old, and I drive a 2010 Toyota Corolla that sounds like a lawnmower. In my family, that is a cardinal sin. Driving through the iron gates of my parents' estate in Buckhead, Atlanta, felt like entering a different country. The private security guard actually stepped out of his booth to block my path, squinting at my car as if it were a contagious disease. I had to roll down the window and explain that I was in fact the eldest daughter of the homeowners, Harold and Vivian. He waved me through with a look of pure skepticism. I pulled up to the main house, a sprawling mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. My mother Vivian was already standing on the front steps. She was not there to welcome me. She was there to manage the aesthetics. Before I could even say, "Happy Thanksgiving," she pointed a manicured finger toward the service entrance. "Maya, do not park there." She snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Move that heap behind the gardener's shed. Tasha and Brad are arriving any minute in their new Range Rover, and I do not want the neighbors thinking we are running a junkyard." I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. "Hello to you too, Mom," I muttered, shifting the car into reverse. I parked behind the shed, hidden away like a dirty secret, and grabbed the pecan pie I had spent 4 hours baking from scratch. It was still warm, smelling of cinnamon and toasted nuts. I walked back to the front just as my mother was, adjusting a wreath on the massive oak door. She glanced at the pie container in my hand and wrinkled her nose. "Is that homemade?" she asked, as if I were holding a dead rat. "You know, we hired a caterer." "Maya, we do not need your sugary experiments cluttering up the dessert table. Just leave it in the kitchen and try to stay out of the way until dinner is served." The crunch of gravel announced the arrival of royalty. A brand new jet black Range Rover pulled into the exact spot I had just been evicted from. My sister Tasha stepped out, looking like she had just walked off a runway. She was 29, an Instagram influencer with perfect skin, expensive hair, and a husband who treated the world like his personal ATM. Brad. Her husband walked around the car adjusting his suit jacket. He was 35, white, worked in high finance, and had a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Vivian practically ran down the steps, her arms wide open, a completely different woman from the one who had just banished my car. "My beautiful girl," she squealed, hugging Tasha and Brad. "You look dashing as always." Tasha flashed a dazzling smile, holding up a bottle of wine. "We brought the Chateau Margaux." "Mom, it is a $500 bottle, so do not let Dad use it for cooking." Vivian gasped in delight, taking the bottle like it was a holy relic. "Oh, you two spoil us. This is what class looks like." I stood there invisible, holding my plastic container. Brad finally noticed me. He looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on my dress, which I had bought on sale at Macy 3 years ago. "Hey, Maya," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I see you are still rocking the vintage look. And by vintage, I mean charity shop, chic." Tasha giggled, covering her mouth with a hand that sported a diamond ring the size of a grape. "Stop it, Brad," she teased. "Not everyone can afford to keep up with trends. Some people have to prioritize, surviving on a teacher's salary." They laughed together, a sound that made my stomach churn. "Come inside, darlings." Vivian ushered them in, turning her back on me completely. "Leave the door open for the help, Maya, and try not to drop that pie on the Persian rug." I watched them walk into the golden light of the foyer, the perfect family unit. I followed them in the door, clicking shut behind me, trapping me in a house that had never felt like a home. I had no idea that in less than an hour, this perfect picture was going to be set on fire, and I would be the one holding the matches. The dining room was a theater of excess. The mahogany table was set with fine china that cost more than my entire year of rent, and the centerpiece was an explosion of autumn flowers that probably had their own zip code. We took our seats like actors in a play we had performed 1,000 times. My father Harold sat at the head, looking tired but stoic, while Vivian fluttered around ensuring the napkins were folded just so. But the star of the show was undoubtedly Brad. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the $500 wine in his glass and launching into a monologue about market volatility. "You really have to have the stomach for it, Harold," he pontificated, his voice booming across the silence. "The average investor panics when they see red. But that is when we make our real money. It is all about leverage. We just got back from Tuscany, and let me tell you, the volatility in the euro markets actually paid for our entire villa stay." Vivian beamed at him as if he had just discovered a cure for the common cold. "You are so clever, Brad," she gushed, turning to my father. "Did you hear that, Harold? They paid for their vacation just by moving money around." My father nodded vaguely, slicing into a dinner roll. Tasha took this opportunity to extend her left hand under the chandelier light. The diamond on her finger caught the glow and fractured it into 1,000 rainbows. "Brad upgraded my setting for our anniversary," she announced casually, turning her hand so the stones sparkled. "I told him the 2 carat was fine, but he insisted on the 4. It does catch the light better, does it not?" Vivian let out a small shriek of delight, reaching out to cradle Tasha's hand. "Oh, honey, it is breathtaking. You deserve every carat. You work so hard being a supportive wife." Then, as if on cue, the spotlight shifted. Tasha turned her gaze toward me, her eyes wide with faux concern. "Speaking of work, Maya, are you still at that Title I high school in East Atlanta? I heard they had another lockdown last week. Is it even safe for you to park that car of yours in the lot?" I gripped my fork, trying to keep my expression neutral. "It is a good school, Tasha. The kids are talented. They just need resources. And yes, my car is fine." Tasha sighed, shaking her head sadly. "I just worry about you, sis. You know, with inflation and gas prices, I do not know how you make ends meet on a public school salary. It must be so stressful living paycheck to paycheck." She took a sip of wine and then brightened as if struck by a charitable idea. "You know, I was cleaning out my closet yesterday, and I have a few seasons-old Chanel suits and some dresses I wore once for photo shoots. They are a bit out of style for my circle, but they would be a huge upgrade for your work wardrobe. Do you want me to have the housekeeper bag them up for you? You could probably sell them if they do not fit." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "That is a wonderful idea, Tasha. You are so generous. Maya, you should take them. You cannot keep wearing that polyester thing to work. It reflects poorly on us." The humiliation burned my throat like acid. They were discussing me like a charity case, like a stray dog they could toss scraps to while sipping their expensive wine. I looked at Grandpa Otis, hoping for an ally, but he was staring at his plate, his hand gripping the carving knife so hard his knuckles were white. He was not eating. He was waiting. And I had no idea that he was about to flip the entire table. Grandfather Otis sat at the head of the expansive mahogany table, a silent observer to the circus performing around him. His hands, usually steady from decades of laying brick and framing houses, now trembled slightly as he sliced through the golden skin of the roast turkey. He was 78 years old, and the only person in this room who looked at me without seeing a disappointment. While Vivian fawned over Brad, refilling his glass before it was even empty, and Tasha inspected her manicure with bored detachment. Otis set down the carving knife and looked directly at me. "Maya," he rumbled, his voice gravelly and warm. "How are the piano lessons going? Are you still teaching those kids from the community center?" The question cut through the pretension in the room like a fresh breeze. I felt a lump form in my throat. It was such a simple inquiry. Yet it was the first time since I arrived that anyone had acknowledged my actual life, not just my lack of wealth. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. They are doing wonderful, Grandpa. We have a recital coming up next month. I actually wanted to thank you. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing against the worn leather wallet. I pulled out a small envelope and slid the check out, holding it with both hands as if it were fragile. It was the birthday check he had mailed me last week, $300, to Tasha and Brad. $300 was a lunch tab. To me, it was the difference between lights and darkness. This month, I looked at him, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Grandpa, this check you sent for my birthday. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I know it might not seem like a lot to everyone else, but it really saved me. The electricity bill was overdue, and the school budget got cut again. So I have not been paid for the after-school program yet. This $300 kept the lights on in my apartment. I just wanted you to know how much I appreciate you always looking out for me. The room went dead silent. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Tasha let out a sharp, cruel laugh, covering it quickly with a cough. "Oh, Maya," she said, shaking her head, her voice dripping with pity. "You are really bringing up a $300 check at Thanksgiving dinner? It is a little embarrassing, isn't it? I mean..." "Brad tips the valet more than that," Vivian chimed in, actively avoiding eye contact with her father. "Honestly, Maya, there is a time and place for discussing your financial inability. We are trying to have a nice dinner." Brad swirled his wine, looking amused at my humiliation. But Otis did not laugh. He did not even blink. He stopped moving completely. His fork hovered halfway to his mouth, and he slowly lowered it to the plate with a clatter. He turned his head slowly, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. He looked at the check in my hand, then looked at my face, searching for something. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, hard confusion that rapidly shifted into something darker, something dangerous. He leaned forward, his voice dropping an octave so low it vibrated through the table wood. $300, he repeated slowly, enunciating every syllable. "Maya, what are you talking about?" I blinked, confused by his reaction. "Yes, Grandpa. The $300 check you sent in the card. The one for my birthday." Otis narrowed his eyes, his gaze shifting from me to Tasha, then to Brad, and finally resting on Vivian. His jaw tightened, and I saw the old contractor, the man who used to command crews of 50 men, re-emerge from beneath the frail exterior of an old man. He pushed his plate away, the screech of china on wood making everyone jump. He looked me dead in the eye and said the words that would change everything. "Maya, I did not send you a check for $300. The air in the dining room seemed to evaporate, leaving a vacuum of absolute silence that pressed against my eardrums. Otis stared at me, his dark eyes narrowing beneath bushy gray brows. He looked like a judge passing a final sentence, not a grandfather. Speaking to his granddaughter. I held the small paper check out slightly, my hand trembling violently now, confused by his flat denial. "But Grandpa," I stammered, my voice sounding thin and foreign in my own ears. "I have it right here. It arrived in the mail on Tuesday, in a blue envelope with your return address. It has your signature." Otis shook his head slowly, a gesture of absolute unyielding denial. "Maya, listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice steady and loud enough to reach the back of the room, enunciating each word with the precision of a man laying bricks. "I did not mail you a check. I did not put anything in a blue envelope. I went to the bank last Monday morning, personally. I stood in line at the main branch downtown, and I filled out the paperwork for a wire transfer. I sent you $500,000. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. $500,000. My brain refused to process the number. It was too big, too abstract. It was a lottery number, not a sum of money my grandfather would just give me. It was enough to buy a house, enough to pay off my debts 10 times over, enough to change my entire existence. And he said it so casually, as if he had just passed the salt. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the roaring in my ears. "Grandpa, you do not have that kind of money." "I do." Otis snapped, his gaze shifting momentarily to Vivian, who had gone the color of old parchment. "I sold the old lumberyard property last month. The deal closed 2 weeks ago. I kept it quiet because I did not want vultures circling." He shot a sharp look at Brad before turning back to me. "I wanted to surprise you, Maya. I wanted you to open that music center you have been dreaming about since you were 12 years old. I wired $500,000 to your business account last Monday, specifically for that purpose." The metal fork slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the china plate, a sound that rang out like a gunshot in the silent room. Mind was racing, spinning, trying to make sense of the disconnect. He sent $500,000. I received a check for 300. There was a gap. A massive, terrifying gap between those two realities, and in that gap, something criminal, something evil had happened. I looked across the table at Tasha. Her perfect influencer composure had cracked wide open, revealing a raw panic underneath. Her eyes were wide, fixed on Otis, with a look of sheer terror, as if she were seeing a ghost. Her hand jerked, a spasmodic reflex of pure guilt, and her elbow collided hard with her wineglass. The crystal goblet tipped over in slow motion, sending a tidal wave of dark red liquid cascading across the pristine white tablecloth. It soaked into the fabric, spreading rapidly like a fresh gunshot wound, staining the expensive linen blood red, creeping toward the centerpiece like an accusation. "Oh my God!" Tasha gasped, jumping up from her chair, her napkin clutching uselessly at the spreading stain. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." "Sorry." She was not looking at the wine, though. She was looking at Brad. Her eyes were pleading, desperate. Terrified, Brad was staring at the tablecloth, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. The silence stretched thin and taut, ready to snap. No one moved. No one breathed. We just watched the red stains spread, growing larger and larger, swallowing the white space between us, mirroring the lie that was suddenly consuming the room. The silence did not last long because my mother shattered it with a laugh that sounded like glass grinding in a disposal unit. Vivian threw her head back, clutching her pearls as if my grandfather had just told a delightful joke, instead of accusing her favorite daughter of grand larceny. "Oh, Daddy, stop it," she gasped, wiping a fake tear from her eye. "You are having one of your episodes again. You really need to drink more water because this dehydration is making you delirious." $500,000 to Maya. She gestured wildly in my direction, her manicured hand slashing through the air. She cannot even keep a $50 bill in her wallet without losing it. Giving Maya investment capital would be like setting cash on fire. She is a music teacher, Daddy. She does not know a balance sheet from a musical scale. If you gave her that much money, she would probably donate it to some stray cat charity or lose it in a week. She stood up and walked over to Otis, placing a hand on his shoulder, in a gesture that looked affectionate but was actually designed to hold him down in his chair. "You are confused, Daddy. We talked about this last Sunday. You wanted to donate $500 to the church roof fund. Remember? 500, not 500,000. You are mixing up your numbers again, just like you mixed up the dates for your cardiologist appointment last month." "It is okay. We know you are getting older and things get foggy." Brad decided this was his cue to step in and save the sinking ship. He dabbed his mouth with a linen napkin and cleared his throat, leaning forward with that insufferable mansplaining posture he used whenever he wanted to make someone feel small. "Otis, look at me," he said, his voice dropping into a register of practiced concern. The same tone he probably used to tell clients they had lost all their money. "I deal with high net worth individuals all day, and I have seen this happen before. It is called cognitive dissonance, coupled with short-term memory degradation. You think you performed an action because you thought about it so intensely. In your mind, the wire transfer is real, but in reality, it never happened." He swirled the remaining wine in his glass, looking around the table for agreement, soliciting support for his diagnosis. We have all noticed you have been a bit spotty lately, haven't we? Mixing up names, forgetting where you put your keys. It is classic early onset symptoms. You probably walked into the bank, got confused, and walked right out, but your brain filled in the gaps to protect your ego. Trust me, Otis. If $500,000 had moved through the banking system, I would know about it. I track the family assets. Meticulously giving that kind of money to someone with Maya financial literacy would be negligent, and you are not negligent. You are just sick. Tasha, having recovered from her initial heart attack, jumped onto the bandwagon, desperate to deflect attention from her red wine disaster. Exactly. Grandpa, she chimed in, her voice shaking only slightly. You promised that money for our investment portfolio. Remember, Brad manages the family assets. Why would you bypass the professional to give it to Maya? It does not make any sense. You are just confused, and it is okay. We can make an appointment with a neurologist next week, just to be safe. I watched them spin their web of lies, weaving a narrative of senility around a man who was sharper than all of them combined. They were terrified. I could smell it on them, beneath the expensive perfume and the roast turkey. They were trying to bury the truth under a mountain of gaslighting, hoping that if they called him crazy loud enough and long enough, he would eventually believe it. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They forgot who Otis was before he was a grandfather. They forgot he was a man who built skyscrapers from dirt, and he knew a structural weakness when he saw one. The air in the dining room shifted violently. Otis did not shrink back into his chair as they expected. Instead, he exploded. He slammed his heavy, calloused hand onto the mahogany table hard enough to make the silverware jump and the crystal water glasses tremble. It was the sound of authority, the sound of a man who had spent 40 years shouting over jackhammers and diesel engines. He pushed himself up from his chair, his legs shaking but holding his weight, his face darkening with a righteous fury that silenced the room instantly. "Do not speak to me like I am a child!" Otis roared, his voice thundering off the high ceilings and silencing Brad mid-sentence. "I am old Brad. I am not an idiot. I built my empire with these two hands while you were still learning how to tie your expensive Italian shoes. I know the difference between $500 and $500,000. I remember every single zero I wrote on that wire transfer slip. I remember the date. I remember the teller name was Sarah, and I remember exactly who was standing right next to me guiding my hand because my cataracts were acting up." He turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto Tasha like a laser sight. The room seemed to shrink, the air sucked out of it, leaving us all gasping in the vacuum. Tasha froze her hand halfway to her mouth, her face draining of all color, leaving behind a mask of perfectly applied makeup over absolute terror. Otis raised a trembling finger and pointed it straight at her chest, accusing her with the force of a biblical prophet. "It was you," he shouted, his voice cracking with the weight of the betrayal. "It was you, Tasha. You came to my house last Monday morning. You told me you wanted to help your grandfather. You said you would drive me to the bank because it was raining. You stood at the counter with me. You told me you had Maya routing number on your phone. You took the pen from my hand because I was squinting at the lines. You said, 'Let me do it, Grandpa. I will make sure the numbers are right so Maya gets her surprise.' You filled out that slip, Tasha. You wrote the account number. You watched me sign it." The accusation hit the table with the force of a physical blow. Tasha shrank back in her chair, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her eyes darted around the room looking for an exit, looking for an ally, looking for a lie that could save her, but there was nowhere to hide from the truth staring her in the face. Otis was not finished. He leaned over the table, his breath coming in short, angry rasps, his eyes burning with disappointment. "I trusted you." He spat the words out like poison. "I trusted you to help your sister, and you looked me in the eye and smiled while you stole from her. Tell them, Tasha. Tell your mother and your husband whose account number you actually wrote on that slip because I know for a fact it was not Maya account. Tasha's face crumbled in an instant. It was a transformation so sudden and complete it belonged on a Broadway stage. One moment, she was the deer in the headlights, caught red-handed, and the next, she was the wounded angel, the victim of a senile old man and a vindictive sister. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling over her long lashes in perfect photogenic streams. She let out a choked sob, pressing a linen napkin to her trembling lips, as if she were physically in pain. "Grandpa," she wailed, her voice cracking with a practiced sorrow that made my stomach turn. "How can you say such terrible things to me after everything I do for you? I love you. I have always taken care of you. We did not go to the bank on Monday. Do not. You remember, I took you to Dr. Henderson's office for your blood pressure checkup. We stopped for soft-serve ice cream afterwards. That was it. That was the only place we went. Why are you making this up?" She turned to the room, arms wide, pleading her case to the jury of our parents, looking small and fragile next to the spreading wine stain. "He is confused. Mom, you see that? Do not you? He is mixing up days. He is mixing up memories. I would never steal from him. I do not need his money. Brad makes more in a bonus check than that transfer was worth. Why would I risk my relationship with you over money? I do not need." Then the predator inside her surfaced. She whipped her head toward me, her wet eyes flashing with a sudden venomous hatred that contrasted sharply with her trembling lower lip. She pointed a shaking finger across the table, aiming it directly at my heart, as if I were the villain in this twisted play. "It is you," she hissed, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper before rising to a hysterical scream. "Maya, what did you do to him? What poisonous lies have you been whispering in his ear when we are not around? Is this because I got the new car? Is this because Brad upgraded my ring? You are so jealous that you would destroy our entire family just to make me look bad, aren't you?" She stood up, knocking her chair back against the wall, fully committing to the performance. "You brainwashed him. You took advantage of an old man, declining mental state because you are bitter about your miserable little life. You cannot stand that I am happy. You cannot stand that Mom and Dad are proud of me, so you planted these crazy ideas in his head to turn him against me. You are sick, Maya. You are absolutely sick." She collapsed into Brad's arms, sobbing uncontrollably into the lapel of his designer suit, her shoulders shaking with the force of her manufactured grief. "She hates me, Brad," she cried, muffled against his chest. "She has always hated me because I made something of myself, and she didn't. Tell them, Brad. Tell them, we do not need the money." Brad wrapped his protective arms around her, looking at me with a mixture of relief and disgust. Relief that Tasha had found a way to deflect the accusation, and disgust that I was still sitting there. "It is okay, baby," he cooed, smoothing her hair while glaring at me. "We know the truth. Maya is clearly projecting her own financial desperation onto us. It is pathetic, really." I sat frozen, watching the narrative shift in real time. Tasha had taken a direct accusation of grand larceny, confirmed by the victim himself, and twisted it into a story about my jealousy and mental instability. It was terrifying. It was brilliant. And looking at the way my mother was glaring at me, I knew it was working. The slap came out of nowhere. It was a sharp, stinging crack that echoed through the dining room, silencing even Tasha manufactured sobs. My head snapped to the side, the taste of copper filling my mouth instantly. Vivian stood over me, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen directed at anyone but me. "You selfish, spiteful little vulture," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "Look at what you have done. You have ruined Thanksgiving. You have upset your grandfather. You have made your sister cry. Are you happy now?" I touched my cheek, feeling the heat radiating from the impact. "Mom," I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. "Get out!" she screamed, pointing toward the front door. "Get out of my house, Maya. Take your cheap pie and your jealous heart and get out." Do not come back until you are ready to apologize to your sister on your knees for these lies. I looked at my father, hoping for some intervention, some voice of reason. But Harold was staring at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes, choosing the path of least resistance as he always did. Brad was smirking slightly behind his hand, comforting Tasha while enjoying the show. And Otis. Poor Otis looked defeated, slumped in his chair, realizing that in this house, truth was less important than appearance. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead weights. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the tears burning my eyes. I will go. But you are making a mistake, Mom. You are choosing the lie because it looks prettier than the truth. Do not lecture me, Vivian shrieked, grabbing my arm and practically dragging me toward the foyer. Get out! Now! I grabbed my purse, stumbling out into the cold November rain. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me, the sound final and devastating. I walked to my car, the rain soaking through my thin dress, mixing with the tears on my face. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking violently from the adrenaline and the cold. As I sat in the driver's seat, the engine sputtering to life, I replayed the scene in my head over and over again. The accusation, the denial, the slap. But then, amidst the chaos of the last 10 minutes, one detail, sharp and clear, rose to the surface. It was a split-second moment, something I had registered subconsciously, but not processed until now. Just as Otis had said the word, bank, I had seen Tasha hand dart under the table, not in a nervous twitch, but with purpose. Her eyes had flickered down just for a second and her thumbs had moved rapidly. She had texted someone, and the look on her face in that instant wasn't confusion or fear. It was calculation. She wasn't just reacting, she was executing a plan. And whoever was on the other end of that text message held the key to where $500,000 had actually gone. I wiped my face, set my jaw, and shifted the car into drive. I was leaving, but I was not giving up. The hunt had just begun. Monday morning arrived with a gray drizzle that matched the knot in my stomach. I called the school secretary at 6 a.m, lying about a migraine. It was the first time in 5 years I had called in sick, but finding a missing $500,000 felt like a valid excuse. I drove to Grandpa Otis' house, finding him waiting on the porch in his Sunday best fedora, pulled low raincoat, buttoned to the chin. He did not look like a confused old man. He looked like a general going to war. We drove to the First National Bank branch in downtown Atlanta, the one with the marble floors and the hushed atmosphere that smelled of old money and judgment. We did not have an appointment, but when you have 8 figures in your savings account, you do not need one. We walked straight to the manager office. Mr. Sterling, a man with a tan that came from a bottle and teeth that had been whitened to an unnatural shade of porcelain, looked up from his desk. He recognized Otis immediately, but his eyes flickered to me with a hint of annoyance. "Ah, Mr. Otis," he said, standing up and smoothing his tie. "Brad mentioned you might be stopping by," he said. "You were a little confused about your accounts lately. Why do not we get you some water and I can give Brad a call to come help us sort this out?" The mention of Brad was a mistake. Otis did not sit down. He leaned on his cane, his knuckles turning white. "I do not need water. Sterling and I certainly do not need Brad. I need the wire transfer receipt from last Monday, the one for $500,000. I want to see exactly where that money went and who signed for it." Sterling let out a patronizing sigh, glancing at me as if asking for help, managing the unruly elderly. "I am afraid I cannot do that, sir. For security reasons, we cannot just print out transaction histories on demand, especially for large wire transfers. There are protocols, privacy laws. If you are having trouble remembering the transaction, perhaps it is best if we wait for your power of attorney to be present. Brad handles these things for you, does he not? He was stonewalling us. It was obvious. He was protecting Brad, Likely because they spent every Saturday on the golf course together, plotting how to spend other people's money. Otis straightened his spine, seeming to grow 3 inches taller in the small office. "Listen to me very closely, son," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I have been banking here for 40 years. I currently have over $10 million in my retirement and investment accounts sitting in this vault. If you do not print that paper in the next 30 seconds, I am closing every single account. I will withdraw every dime in cash if I have to. And while the tellers are counting it, I will be on the phone with the investigative team at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, telling them how this bank helps con artists steal from seniors." Sterling's face went pale beneath his fake tan. Beads of sweat popped up on his forehead. The threat of losing a whale client and facing a PR nightmare was enough to shatter his smug facade. He swallowed hard and sat back down, his hands hovering over the keyboard. "Fine. Mr. Otis," he stammered, typing furiously. "I will print the trace, but I am telling you, everything is in order." The printer whirred to life, spitting out a single sheet of paper that held the truth we had been chasing. Sterling handed it to Otis, his hand shaking slightly. We snatched the paper, staring at the destination field. The money had not gone to a contractor or a legitimate business. It had gone to an entity called Maya Music, LLC, a company I had never heard of in my life. The printer hummed a low mechanical whine that sounded like a death rattle in the quiet office. Mr. Sterling snatched the paper from the tray as soon as it emerged, hesitating for a fraction of a second before sliding it across the polished desk toward us. I grabbed it before Grandpa Otis could reach his hand, shaking too much to hold it steady. My eyes scanned the lines of data blurring past transaction codes and timestamps until they locked onto the single line that mattered. November 14th. Wire transfer. Outbound. Amount $500,000. Status completed. I read the beneficiary name out loud, my voice sounding thin and foreign in the sterile air. Maya Music, LLC. I looked up at Grandpa, confusion warring with the rising panic in my chest. "Grandpa, I have never heard of this company. I do not have an LLC. I am a public school teacher. I get paid by the district via direct deposit. I have never incorporated a business in my life. I do not even have a business license." Otis leaned in, squinting at the paper, his finger tracing the line. "But look at the authorization. Maya, that is your signature right there at the bottom. Authorization signature, Maya Williams." I looked closer, leaning over the desk until my nose was inches from the paper. The ink on the scanned copy was black and sharp. There was a scrawl on the line that looked terrifyingly familiar. The loop of the M, the sharp tail on the A. It was my signature. Or at least it was a masterful copy of it. It looked exactly like the way I signed permission slips and grade cards every single day, but I knew with absolute certainty that I had not signed this document. On November 14th, I had been in a faculty meeting from 8 in the morning until noon, arguing with the vice principal about the budget cuts for the spring concert. I had 20 witnesses and meeting minutes to prove I was nowhere near a bank. "Someone forged my signature," whispered the realization, making the room tilt on its axis. "They opened a company. In my name, Grandpa. They used my identity. They made it look like I requested this transfer and set up the destination account. If anyone came looking, the paper trail would lead straight back to me. They were not just stealing the money. They were framing me for the theft." Sterling cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his leather chair, clearly unhappy with the word forgery being tossed around in his glass-walled office. "Now, Ms. Maya, those are serious accusations. The bank verifies identification for all business accounts. We would have required a driver license and articles of incorporation. If the account exists, it was opened with valid government-issued identification." I turned on him, my fear hardening into a cold, sharp anger. "Then show me the ID that was used to open this account. Show me the articles of incorporation, because I promise you, I did not provide them, and I have my passport and license. Right here in my purse. Sterling hesitated, glancing at his computer screen, avoiding my gaze. I cannot access the opening documents for the beneficiary account. Ms. Williams, this transfer went to a different institution. It is a digital fintech bank, the kind that requires minimal face-to-face interaction. We only see the routing number and the entity name. Otis slammed his cane on the floor, the sound cracking like a whip. A digital bank. Tasha, she is always on that phone moving money around with those apps. She told me she was helping me set up the transfer to your regular savings account. Maya. She must have routed it to this fake company instead. She used my failing eyesight against me. I looked back at the statement. The address for Maya. Music LLC was listed right under the name. It was not my apartment address. It was not the school. It was a P.O. box in a shipping center in Buckhead, a part of town I rarely visited because I could not afford to shop there. But the address seemed vaguely familiar, scratching at the back of my memory. This is a setup, Grandpa. I said, my voice steady now. They created a shell company with a name that sounded legitimate. A name that would fool you, Maya. Music LLC. It sounds exactly like something I would do. It is the perfect cover. If you ever asked where the money went, she could just point to this statement and say, "See, Grandpa, she got it. She must have wasted it or hidden it." Otis' face was a mask of sorrow and rage. He had built a legacy to protect his family, and now that very family was cannibalizing each other for scraps of paper. "We are going to that address," he said, standing up with a groan, his knees popping. "We are going to find out who really owns Maya Music LLC, and then I am going to call the police." Sterling stood up too, looking relieved to be getting us out of his office. "I hope you resolve this family matter," he said, smoothing his suit. "But as far as the bank is concerned, this was an authorized transaction." I looked at him one last time, my grip tightening on the piece of paper. It was authorized by a ghost. "Mr. Sterling, and we are going to catch her." I walked out of the office, the forged signature staring up at me. Tasha had not just stolen the money. She had stolen my name. She had stolen my integrity, and she had done it with a smile on her face while eating my pecan pie at the Thanksgiving table. The GPS led me to a high-end shipping center in Buckhead, sandwiched between a luxury spa and a boutique that sold dog collars for more than my car payment. It was the kind of place where the air smelled like lavender money. The address on the bank statement matched perfectly. Box 404. I parked my Corolla as far away from the entrance as possible, feeling the familiar sting of not belonging in this zip code. But today I was not here to shop. I was here to hunt. I pushed open the glass door, a bell chiming softly overhead. The air conditioning was set to Arctic. A young woman with bright purple braids sat behind the counter scrolling on her phone, looking bored out of her mind. She looked up as I approached, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Ms. Williams, is that you?" I blinked, surprised. It took a moment, but then I smiled. "Jasmine. From third period choir 3 years ago." She had the voice of an angel but terrible stage fright. I remembered spending weeks coaching her through her solo for the winter concert. "Jasmine," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "It is so good to see you. I did not know you worked here." "I started last month," she said, putting her phone down. "You look stressed, Ms. Williams. Is everything okay?" I leaned over the counter, lowering my voice. "Jasmine, I need your help. It is an emergency. Someone has been using my identity. They opened a business account using my name and registered it to Box 404 at this location. I need to know who has been picking up the mail." Jasmine bit her lip, looking conflicted. "You know I cannot give out client information. Ms. Williams, my manager would kill me. It is against policy." I reached out and covered her hand. "Jasmine, please. This person stole $500,000 from my grandfather. They are ruining my life. If I do not find out who it is, I could lose everything. My job, my home, everything. You know, I would not ask if it were not life or death." She looked at me, searching my face for the truth. She saw the fear in my eyes, the exhaustion hanging off me like a heavy coat. Finally, she sighed and typed a few keystrokes on her computer. Box 404, she muttered. Yeah, that is a busy one. We get packages there almost every day. High-end stuff, Saks, Neiman, Marcus, Louis Vuitton. The recipient is listed as Maya Music LLC, but the person who picks it up is definitely not you. Who is it, Jasmine? Who picks up the mail? She glanced at the security camera in the corner, then back at me. Come around the counter, she whispered. I am not supposed to show you this, but she was just here yesterday afternoon. She tapped the screen, pulling up the security feed from the previous day. She scrubbed through the timeline until a figure appeared at the door. There she is. Jasmine pointed. I leaned in, my breath catching in my throat. The woman on the screen was dressed like she was trying to be incognito, but failing miserably. She wore oversized designer sunglasses that covered half her face and a silk scarf wrapped around her head like a celebrity avoiding the paparazzi. But there was no mistaking the posture, the arrogant tilt of the head, the way she snapped her fingers at Jasmine to hurry up. And then I saw it. The clincher. She was carrying a limited edition orange Hermes Birkin bag, the exact same bag Tasha had posted on her Instagram story 2 days ago, bragging about her new investment piece. She signed for a package addressed to Maya Music LLC. Jasmine said quietly. She comes in here twice a week. She always wears the glasses. But I heard her talking on the phone once. She told someone she was at the office. It was Tasha. My own sister was not just stealing money. She was using my name to launder her shopping addiction through a fake company. She was buying luxury goods with my grandfather's retirement money and having them shipped to a box registered in my name. If the police ever investigated this without context, they would find a warehouse of designer gear linked to me, not her. She was setting me up to be the fall guy for her embezzlement. Can I get a copy of that video, Jasmine? I asked, my voice shaking with rage. She nodded, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. Take it, Ms. Williams, nail her. She was rude to me anyway. I walked out of that shipping center, clutching the USB drive like a weapon. Tasha thought she was so smart, playing dress-up and hiding behind a P.O. box. But she forgot one thing. You can wear a disguise, but you cannot hide your entitlement. And now I had her on tape. I knew I could not go to the police yet, not with just a video of Tasha picking up mail. Tasha was the face of the operation, but Brad was the brain Tasha could not balance a checkbook, let alone set up a complex shell company structure that routed money through digital banks. I needed someone who could dig into the dirt without getting caught. I needed Ray. Ray was the father of Jamal, one of my best trumpet players. He was a single dad, a former Atlanta police detective, and currently the most resourceful private investigator in the city. He also owed me a favor for tutoring Jamal in music theory so he could get into the jazz magnet program. I called him from the parking lot of the shipping center and met him an hour later at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. I slid the bank statement and the USB drive across the sticky laminate table. Ray looked at them, his dark eyes scanning the data with professional detachment. He did not look surprised. Nothing surprised Ray anymore, so let me get this straight, he said, taking a sip of black coffee. Your sister is playing dress-up with your identity, and your brother-in-law is playing Monopoly with your grandfather's retirement. And you want to know where the rest of the money is going? Exactly, I said, leaning in. I need to know about Brad. He acts like he owns Wall Street, but something does not add up. He spends money too fast, even for a hedge fund manager. I need to know his financials. Ray, I need to know if he is really as rich as he claims to be. Ray nodded, tucking the USB drive into his leather jacket pocket. Give me 24 hours, Maya. If he has skeletons, I will find them. He called me the next evening, telling me to meet him in his car outside my apartment complex. The look on his face when I slid into the passenger seat told me everything. This was not just bad, this was catastrophic. You were right to be suspicious, Ray said, handing me a thick manila folder. Brad is not rich. Maya, In fact, he is technically destitute. He has been unemployed for 6 months. I stared at him, my mouth falling open. Unemployed. But he leaves the house every morning in a $3,000 suit. He talks about his trades at dinner. He just bought a Range Rover. Ray shook his head. He leaves the house all right. He drives that Range Rover 5 miles down the road to a Starbucks in Sandy Springs. He sits there from 9 to 5 on his laptop using the free Wi-Fi. He brings his own coffee in a thermos so he does not have to buy anything. He is not trading stocks. Maya, he is playing online poker and dodging debt collectors. I opened the folder. My eyes widened as I saw the surveillance photos Ray had taken. There was Brad, the man who had mocked my $300 check sitting at a small round table in a coffee shop. He had loosened his tie and was slumped over, looking bored and pathetic, surrounded by teenagers doing homework. This was the man who had called me a charity case, the man who had sneered at my car. He was a fraud, a complete and total fraud. But if he has no job, I asked, my mind racing, how did they buy the car? How are they paying the mortgage on that mansion in Buckhead? Ray looked at me, his expression grim. They aren't. The car is a lease. The house is 3 months behind on payments. They are drowning Maya. And that $500,000 from your grandfather? It was not an investment. It was a lifeline. They stole it because without it, their entire fake life was about to collapse. I flipped through the pages of the dossier Ray had compiled, my fingers brushing against the cold, hard evidence of Brad's deception. Insider trading, I whispered the term, feeling heavy and criminal on my tongue. Are you sure? Ray leaned back against the headrest, staring out into the dark parking lot. 100%, he said, his voice low. He was working for Apex Capital in New York. 6 months ago, they quietly let him go. No press release, no charges filed. They just wanted him gone before the SEC started asking questions. It's standard procedure for these big firms. They sweep the dirt under the rug to protect their reputation, and guys like Brad walk away with a clean record but zero references. I looked down at the termination letter copy Ray had somehow obtained. The language was sterile, citing violation of compliance protocols and immediate separation. It was dated June 15th. For the past half year, while Brad was bragging about his bonuses and mocking my teaching salary, he had been living on fumes and severance pay. But the debt, I said, pointing to another sheet filled with red ink. This is insane, Ray. 3 maxed-out credit cards. A personal loan for $50,000 with an interest rate that should be illegal. How is he even sleeping at night? He isn't, Ray replied dryly. That is why he is at Starbucks at 7 a.m. He is avoiding the calls. I tracked his phone records. He gets about 20 calls a day from unknown numbers, collections agencies. They are circling Maya. He is desperate. And desperate men do dangerous things. I thought about the way Brad had looked at me during Thanksgiving dinner. The arrogance, the smug superiority. It wasn't just a personality flaw. It was a defense mechanism. He was projecting an image of success so blindingly bright that no one would notice the rot underneath. He needed to be the big shot, because the alternative, being a fraud, was too terrifying to face. And Tasha. Did she know, or was she just another prop in his elaborate stage play? Does Tasha know? I asked, voicing the thought aloud. Ray shrugged. Hard to say. She is spending like she thinks the well is bottomless, but she has to suspect something. You don't live with someone for 6 months of unemployment without noticing they aren't bringing home a paycheck. Unless... He paused, tapping a finger on the dashboard. Unless he told her he is consulting or launching a fund, that is the usual lie. He told us he was promoted to vice president, I said, remembering the toast Vivian had made just last month. My mother threw a party for him. She bought him a $3,000 watch to celebrate. A watch he probably pawned the next day, Ray noted. Look at page 4. I turned the page and gasped. It was a pawnshop receipt from a place on Cheshire Bridge Road. Item description, Rolex Submariner. Date, October 2nd. The amount he received was a fraction of its value, but it was cash in hand. He had sold my mother's gift to pay off a gambling debt, or maybe just to keep the lights on in their rented mansion. He is a con artist, Maya, Ray said, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. And he just found his biggest mark yet. Your grandfather. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The $500,000 wasn't just greed. It was survival. Brad wasn't trying to get richer. He was trying to stay out of jail. He needed that money to plug the holes in his sinking ship before the water rose over his head. And he had used my sister, my identity, and my grandfather's trust to get it. He is going to destroy them, I said, my voice trembling. If we don't stop him, he is going to drain Grandpa dry and drag Tasha down with him. He already has, Ray said grimly. Keep reading. I turned the page to Tasha's section, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a sea of red ink. $80,000. That was the number staring back at me from the bottom of the summary page. My little sister, the golden child who looked down on my Toyota, was drowning in $80,000 of credit card debt. Ray pointed to the itemized list. It was a catalog of vanity, designer shoes, spa treatments, five-star dinners. But then I looked closer at the dates and the merchants. Ray broke the silence, his voice devoid of judgment, just stating facts. She is running a Ponzi scheme on her own life. Maya, you see those Hermes bags she posts on Instagram, the ones she claims Brad bought her for achievements? She rents them. There is a site called Bag, Borrow, or Steal. She pays $400 a week to carry a bag she pretends to own. And the clothes she buys them, films her unboxing videos and returns them the next day. I checked her return history at Saks. She has returned 90% of what she bought in the last year. I felt a wave of nausea. The G-Wagon she had bragged about at Thanksgiving, the one she said was a custom order. It was a short-term lease with a mileage limit she had probably already exceeded. Everything was fake. The jewelry, the vacations, the lifestyle. It was all a carefully curated lie, designed to get likes and make me feel small. But behind the filters, she was terrified. She was shuffling balance transfers between cards just to make the minimum payments. This is why they needed the money, Ray said, tapping the bank statement. They are not investing it. Maya, they are plugging a hole in the Titanic with bubblegum. Brad has bookies and loan sharks breathing down his neck. Tasha is one missed payment, away from having her cards declined at brunch. That $500,000 from your grandfather. It was not a windfall. It was a bailout. They stole it because they had no other choice. Their house of cards was about to collapse and they decided to use your name. As the foundation to prop it back up, I stared at the photo of Tasha. Ray had included. She was smiling, holding a glass of champagne, looking like she did not have a care in the world. But now I looked closer, and I saw the tension in her jaw, the fear in her eyes. She was trapped. She had married a fraud, and instead of admitting it, she had become one herself. And to save her own skin, she had thrown me to the wolves. She was not just my sister anymore. She was a desperate woman with a secret, and those are the most dangerous kind. I drove back to my parents' house, not to apologize but to find the original copy of my birth certificate. I needed it for the fraud investigation, and I knew my mother kept all our vital records in the safe in the library. I parked down the street and walked up the driveway, praying the code had not been changed. I let myself in quietly, the house silent and smelling of lemon polish and secrets. I was halfway to the library when I heard my mother's voice drifting from the sunroom. It was that hushed, urgent tone she used when she was gossiping about the neighbors, but this time she was not talking about the neighbors. She was talking to Tasha. I froze, pressing my back against the cold wall, breath held tight in my chest. "Stop crying, Tasha," Vivian hissed, her voice vibrating with irritation. "I told you I would fix it, just like I fixed the Neiman Marcus bill last year. You need to calm down before Brad comes home." If he sees you like this, he will know you are cracking. I crept closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. Fix it. What had she fixed? Then came the words that stopped my heart cold. You think I wanted to sell your grandmother's sapphire set? That was the only thing of value she left us. The jeweler practically stole it from me for $40,000. But I did it for you, Tasha. I paid off that credit card so you could keep up appearances. You cannot let this lifestyle slip, girl. Once people smell blood in the water, you are done. The room spun, the sapphire set. Grandma Betty had left that jewelry specifically to me in her will. It was supposed to be mine on my 30th birthday, but Mom had always claimed it was in a safety deposit box for safekeeping, waiting for the right occasion. She had stolen my inheritance, sold it to a pawnbroker, and used the cash to pay off Tasha's shopping addiction. She had liquidated my legacy to fund her golden child's delusion. But what she said next was the dagger that finally killed the last shred of love I had for her. Don't worry about Maya. Vivian said, her voice dropping lower, dismissive and cold. She is used to struggling, Tasha. She can handle the disappointment. She is strong like a mule. You are different. You are delicate. You were made for this life. Maya was made to survive. She will be fine with nothing. She always is. We just have to make sure she keeps her mouth shut about the money. If she ruins this for you, Tasha, I will never forgive her. I stood there in the hallway, tears streaming down my face, not from sadness but from a rage so pure it felt like holy fire. My mother did not just favor Tasha. She viewed me as livestock, a workhorse bred to carry burdens so her show pony could run free. She had stolen from me, not out of desperation, but out of a twisted calculation that my happiness cost less than Tasha's reputation. I backed away silently, leaving the birth certificate, leaving the house, leaving the mother. I thought I knew. I did not need the paper anymore. I had the truth. And it was time to burn their house of cards to the ground. I texted Tasha, asking to meet at a small coffee shop in Midtown, far away from the prying eyes of our usual circles. I told her I wanted to clear the air to apologize for ruining Thanksgiving. It was the bait she could not resist, the chance to see me grovel. Tasha walked in 10 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and a trench coat that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She looked every inch the grieving victim, but I knew better. Under my sweater, a small digital recorder was taped to my chest, humming silently. I stood up, my hands clasped in front of me, trying to look contrite. Tasha, I started, my voice trembling, just enough to sound convincing. I am so sorry about what happened with Grandpa. I did not mean to cause a scene. I was confused about the money. Tasha sat down without taking off her sunglasses, sipping her latte with an air of disdain. You should be sorry, Maya, she said coolly. You humiliated me in front of Brad. You made Grandpa upset. His blood pressure was through the roof after you left. We had to call the doctor. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to play the part. I know. The bank statement said, the money went to a company with my name on it. I thought maybe someone stole my identity. Tasha laughed, a short, sharp sound, devoid of humor. Oh, Maya, you are so naive. It was not identity theft. It was a business arrangement. Grandpa agreed to pay Brad a consulting fee for managing his portfolio. We used an LLC for tax purposes. It is standard practice in high finance. You wouldn't understand. But why use my name? I asked, leaning in slightly. Why call it Maya Music LLC? She shrugged, examining her nails. Because Grandpa is old. Maya, he gets confused. We thought if we put your name on it, he would feel better about signing the check. It was a kindness, really. We were protecting him from his own anxiety. And honestly, you should be grateful. We are growing the family wealth eventually. Some of that might trickle down to you if you learn to behave. The arrogance was breathtaking. She was admitting to fraud right there in the middle of a coffee shop, convinced she was untouchable. But Grandpa said he wanted me to have it. I pressed, pushing her just a little further. He said it was for a music center. Tasha leaned across the table, lowering her sunglasses to look me in the eye. Listen to me very carefully, sis. No one cares what a senile old man thinks, he said. And no one is going to believe you over us. You are a broke schoolteacher driving a 10-year-old car. My husband is a Wall Street genius. Do you really think a judge or a jury is going to take your word against his? We have lawyers, Maya. We have resources. You have nothing. So do yourself a favor. Drop it. Go back to your little classroom and leave the finances to the adults. Or I promise you, you will regret it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear behind the bravado. She was terrified, but she was also dangerous. I nodded slowly, letting her think she had won. Okay, Tasha, I said, my voice quiet. I understand. Good, she said, standing up and smoothing her coat. I am glad we had this talk. Don't be late for Christmas. We expect a better pie this time. She walked out, leaving me with a cold cup of coffee and a recording that was going to bury her. I sat there for a moment watching Tasha strut out of the coffee shop like she had just won a fashion show. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins so hard my hands were shaking. I waited until the door swung shut behind her, before I reached under the collar of my sweater to retrieve the small digital recorder taped to my chest. I needed to check the file. I needed to make sure I had captured every word of her confession. I peeled the tape back, wincing as it pulled at my skin, and held the small black device in my palm. It was light, but it felt like the heaviest weapon in the world. I had her. I finally had proof. But before I could press the stop button, a large hand shot over my shoulder and snatched the device from my grip. The movement was so fast and violent I gasped, jumping in my seat. I spun around to see Brad standing there looming over me like a skyscraper. His face was not the charming mask he wore at family dinners. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. He did not say a word. He just looked at the recorder in his hand, curled his lip in disgust, and dropped it with a splash into my half-finished glass of ice water. I watched in horror as the little red light flickered and died. The device sank to the bottom, bubbling among the ice cubes, drowning along with my evidence. Brad smiled a cold, dead smile that did not reach his eyes. He leaned down, bracing his hands on the table, trapping me in the booth. The smell of his expensive musk cologne filled my nose, suffocating me. You really are a slow learner, aren't you, Maya? He whispered, his voice low and smooth like velvet, wrapped around a razor blade. Did you honestly think you could outsmart me with a toy from an office supply store? I have been watching you since you parked your piece of junk car 2 blocks away. I tried to push past him, but he shifted his weight, blocking my exit. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying the fear in my eyes. Listen to me, and listen good, he hissed, leaning in until his lips were inches from my ear. If you keep digging, if you go to the police or try to talk to your grandfather again, I will not just sue you, I will destroy you. I know Principal Henderson over at your little high school. We play golf at the club on Sundays. He owes me a favor. One phone call, Maya. Just one call telling him that his music teacher is mentally unstable and harassing my family. And you will be out on the street. You will lose your tenure, your pension, and your reputation. You will never teach in this state again. He pulled back slightly, patting my shoulder with a heavy, condescending hand, like I was a disobedient dog. Go home, Maya. Go back to your sad little apartment and be grateful we let you keep that much. You are out of your depth here. The water is full of sharks and you are bleeding. He straightened his suit jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and turned on his heel, walking out the door without looking back. I sat there staring at the water glass, watching the last air bubbles escape from the drowned recorder. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He was not bluffing. He had the power, the connections, and the cruelty to ruin my life with a single conversation. I was not just fighting for my grandfather money anymore, I was fighting for my survival. I met Ray at his home office, A converted garage that smelled of stale coffee and printer ink shortly after Brad threatened me. The red light on his server was blinking rapidly, casting long shadows against the walls. Ray did not look up when I entered. He just pointed at the bank of monitors on his desk. "Sit down, Maya," he said, his voice flat and hard. "You need to see this." I pulled up a chair, my heart still racing from the encounter with Brad. "What is it? Ray, did you find the debt payments? Did he use the $500,000 to pay off Tasha credit cards?" Ray spun his chair around, his face grim. "No. Maya, that is what we thought he would do. That is what a desperate man trying to save his marriage would do. But Brad is not trying to save anything. He is cashing out." He tapped a key and a complex flowchart appeared on the main screen. It showed the money leaving my grandfather account, hitting the fake Maya Music LLC account, and then immediately bouncing again. But it did not go to Visa or American Express. It went offshore. The final destination was a numbered account in the Cayman Islands under the name Blue Water Holdings. I stared at the screen, confusion clouding my mind. What is Blue Water Holdings? Is that Tasha investment firm? Ray shook his head. "It is a shell company, Maya, and here is the kicker. I hacked the registry records. It is a single-owner entity. The sole signatory is Bradley J. Peterson. Tasha. Name is nowhere on it. She does not even have access to view the balance." The implication hit me like a physical blow. Tasha thought they were in this together. She thought they were stealing from Grandpa to pay off their debts, to save their house, to keep up the charade of their perfect life. She was forging documents and lying to her family, believing she was saving her marriage. But Brad was not paying off the debts. He was hoarding the cash. He was letting the interest on Tasha credit cards pile up while he funneled the stolen money into a private escape fund he is stealing. "From her too," I whispered. The realization made me sick. He is going to take the money and run, isn't he? Ray clicked another window, opening a travel itinerary. He bought plane tickets yesterday. Maya one way, first class to Paris, departing December 26th. The day after Christmas, I looked at the reservation. 2 passengers, Mr. Bradley Peterson and Ms. Jessica Miller. "Who is Jessica Miller?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was not going to be good. Ray pulled up a photo of a young blonde woman, probably 22 years old, standing next to a Porsche. She was his former executive assistant, the one he was supposedly mentoring. Brad was not just leaving the country, he was leaving Tasha. He was going to let her take the fall for the fraud, let her face the eviction and the bankruptcy and the criminal charges while he disappeared to Europe with his mistress and my grandfather money. Tasha thinks she is the mastermind of a family heist, but she is actually the victim of a long con she is going to lose everything. Her husband, her home, her reputation, and her freedom. And she has no idea it is coming. She is protecting the man who is sharpening the knife to stab her in the back. I sat back in the chair, the magnitude of the betrayal washing over me. I hated Tasha for what she did to me. I hated her arrogance and her cruelty. But this was a level of evil that made my blood run cold. Brad was not just a thief, he was a predator, and he was about to eat my family alive. I drove back to my grandfather's house, my mind still reeling from Ray's discovery. I found Otis in his study, staring at a framed photo of my grandmother Betty taken 50 years ago. He looked old and tired, but when I told him what we had found, the years seemed to melt away, replaced by a steel spine and a gaze that could cut glass. "He is leaving, Otis," repeated slowly, his voice devoid of tremor, "leaving with the money and leaving Tasha to rot in prison." I nodded, pulling up the flight itinerary on my phone. He bought tickets yesterday. Grandpa one way to Paris. He is cleaning out the account and disappearing the day after Christmas. Otis leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. He did not look shocked. He did not look heartbroken. He looked like a man who had just confirmed a suspicion he had been harboring for a long time. "You know, Maya," he said quietly, "I never trusted that man. He smiles too much, and his hands are too soft. A man who makes money moving numbers around instead of building things. He has no foundation." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick legal document bound in a blue folder. He slid it across the desk toward me. "Take a look at this." I opened the folder. My eyes scanned the dense legal jargon until I hit the title, Petition for Conservatorship over Estate and Person of Otis Williams. I looked up at him confused. "What is this, Grandpa?" "It is Brad Endgame," Otis said, his voice hard. "He brought this over last week. He told me it was a standard tax protection strategy," he said. "The government is coming after my estate taxes, and the only way to protect the family legacy is to put everything into a trust managed by a conservator. Him. He said it would save us millions. He said I would still be in charge, but on paper he would handle the heavy lifting." I flipped through the pages. It was terrifyingly comprehensive. It gave Brad full legal authority over every asset Otis owned, his bank accounts, his real estate portfolio, his medical decisions. If Otis signed this, he would effectively become a child in the eyes of the law, and Brad would hold the keys to a $10 million kingdom. "He was pressuring me to sign it by Christmas," Otis continued. "He said the tax laws change on January 1st. He said if we do not do it now, we will lose half the estate to the IRS. He was so urgent about it, so helpful. But now I see. The $500,000, that was just the appetizer. He was testing the waters, seeing if he could move money without raising alarms. And now he is going for the main course." The audacity was staggering. Brad wasn't just planning to steal $500,000 and run. He was planning to lock down the entire fortune, liquidate it, and vanish, leaving Otis destitute and Tasha legally responsible for the mess. "He thinks I am a senile old fool," Otis said, a dark smile spreading across his face. "He thinks he can wave some scary tax words at me, and I will sign over my life work. Well, I have news for Mr. Wall Street. I was negotiating contracts with union bosses before he was born. I know when I am being hustled." He closed the folder with a snap, looking at me with eyes that burned with a fierce intelligence. "We are not going to let him run, Maya. We are going to let him think he has won. And then we are going to crush him." Otis leaned forward, his elbows resting on the polished mahogany desk, his eyes gleaming with a predatory intelligence I had not seen in years. "We are going to give him exactly what he wants," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He thinks I am losing my mind. Fine, I will lose it. I will lose it so spectacularly, he will think he has won the lottery." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning in closer. "I am going to call him tomorrow," Otis explained, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I am going to tell him I forgot where I put the deed to the house. I am going to ask him the same question 3 times in 5 minutes. I am going to act so confused and helpless that he will start counting the money in his head before I even sign the papers. And then—" He paused for effect. "I am going to tell him I want to sign the conservatorship agreement on Christmas Eve, at the party, in front of everyone." "Christmas Eve," I repeated, my mind racing. "Why then?" "Because that is when he will be most vulnerable," Otis said. "He will be surrounded by his fancy friends, drinking expensive scotch, feeling like the king of the world. He will think it is a coronation. He won't be looking for a trap. And that is when we spring it." It was brilliant and terrifying. Brad was arrogant, but he wasn't stupid. If he sensed even a hint of a setup, he would bolt. He would disappear with the $500,000 he already had, and we would never see him again. We had to be perfect. "But what about Tasha?" I asked. "If she finds out—" "Tasha sees what she wants to see," Otis said dismissively. "She wants to believe her husband is a genius who is saving the family fortune. She won't question it if I say I want to sign over control. She will think she is winning. We use her greed against her Maya. We let her think she is the favorite granddaughter finally getting her due. And the bank? I asked. The wire transfer. If we wait until Christmas Eve, that money is gone. Let it go, Otis said, waving a hand. 500,000 is the bait, Maya. If we try to claw it back now, he will know we are onto him. We have to let him keep it. Let him feel safe. Let him think the transfer was a success so he gets greedy for the rest. We are playing for the whole pot now. The house, the investments, the future. We sacrifice the pawn to take the king. I looked at my grandfather, really looked at him. He wasn't the frail old man my family treated him as. He was a shark who had just decided to stop swimming in circles and start hunting. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the winning team. Okay, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. Let's do it. But if we are going to do this, we need to make sure he has no reason to suspect me. I need to disappear. I need to look like I have given up. Exactly. Otis nodded. You need to play the defeated victim. Let them think they broke you. Let them think you are scared. Because when you walk into that party on Christmas Eve, I want them to be so shocked they forget to breathe. The first blow arrived at 8 in the morning via a courier in a cheap suit who looked like he regretted his life choices. He handed me a thick envelope with the logo of a prestigious midtown law firm embossed in gold. Inside was a cease and desist order that read like a declaration of war. It accused me of elder abuse. It claimed I was using undue influence to manipulate a vulnerable senior citizen for financial gain. It forbade me from contacting Otis Williams, entering his property, or attempting to manage his affairs under threat of immediate legal action. The signature at the bottom belonged to a senior partner, but the malice dripping from every paragraph belonged entirely to Brad. He was cutting off my supply lines, isolating me from my only ally, trying to starve me into submission. Before I could make a move, I barely had time to process the legal threat before the second blow landed. My phone buzzed with a summons to the principal office. Principal Henderson was a good man, a man who had hired me when the budget was tight because he believed in the arts. But when I walked into his office, he would not meet my eyes. He sat behind his desk looking at a file folder like it contained radioactive waste. Maya, he said, his voice heavy with reluctance. We received a formal complaint this morning, an anonymous tip regarding your mental stability. My stomach dropped through the floorboards. Anonymous, I asked, though I knew exactly who had sent it. It alleges that you are suffering from acute financial stress that is manifesting in erratic behavior. Henderson continued reading from the paper. It claims you have been harassing family members and displaying signs of paranoia. The board takes these allegations very seriously, especially when students are involved. We have to prioritize the safety of the children. But this is a lie, I protested, standing up, my hands gripping the edge of his desk. This is retaliation. My brother-in-law is trying to silence me because I found out he is stealing from my grandfather? You know me? Sir, I have never been erratic. I have perfect attendance. Henderson sighed, rubbing his temples. I know, Maya. And personally, I believe you. But the complaint was copied to the district superintendent. My hands are tied until we can conduct a formal investigation. I have to place you on administrative leave, effective immediately. You will need to hand over your keys and your badge. Walking out of that school felt like a funeral procession. I passed the band room where my students were warming up for third period. The sound of scales on trumpets and clarinets drifted into the hallway. A chaotic, beautiful noise that usually made my heart soar. Now it just sounded like a door slamming shut. Brad had made good on his threat. He had taken the one thing that belonged wholly to me, my career, my sanctuary. He wanted to break me. He wanted me to crawl into a hole and die. But as I walked to my car, Clutching the box of personal items from my desk, I did not feel broken, I felt dangerous. He thought he had disarmed me by taking away my job. He was wrong. He had just given me nothing left to lose, and a woman with nothing to lose is the most terrifying thing on earth. I barely had time to put my box of personal items on the kitchen table when the pounding started on my apartment door. It wasn't a knock. It was an assault. I opened it to find Vivian standing there, her hair disheveled, her designer coat hanging open, looking like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. She pushed past me into my small living room, her eyes wild, scanning the space as if looking for something to destroy. "How dare you!" she screamed, spinning around to face me. "You got suspended. I just got off the phone with Principal Henderson's wife. How could you embarrass us like this?" "Maya, is it not enough that you ruined Thanksgiving? Now you want to ruin our reputation in the whole community." "Mom, please," I said, raising my hands, trying to calm her down. "Brad got me suspended. He sent a fake complaint because I know about the money. Money! Money! Money!" Vivian grabbed a vase from my side table and hurled it at the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, the sound like a bomb going off in the small room. "Is that all you care about? You are jealous, Maya. You have always been jealous of Tasha because she knows how to be happy. She found a good man. She built a beautiful life, and you cannot stand it. You want to tear it down because you are miserable and alone." She picked up a framed photo of me and Grandpa Otis and threw it to the floor, the glass cracking right across our smiling faces. "You are toxic, Maya. You are a cancer in this family. Brad is trying to protect us. He is trying to build a future, and you are trying to burn it down with your lies." I watched her rampaging through my apartment, overturning chairs, sweeping books off shelves. And suddenly, the hurt vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. She did not care about the truth. She did not care that Brad was a thief. She did not care that I had lost my job. All she cared about was the image, the perfect family portrait, the lie. She loved Tasha because Tasha was the mirror that reflected what Vivian wanted to see. I was the crack in the glass. "You do not love me, do you, Mom?" I asked, my voice quiet but cutting through her screaming. Vivian stopped, panting heavily amidst the wreckage of my living room. She looked at me, her eyes cold and empty. "I love you, Maya," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "But I do not like you, and right now, I wish you were not my daughter." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I did not flinch. I walked to the door and opened it. "Get out," I said, pointing to the hallway. "Get out of my apartment and do not come back. If you do, I will call the police. And Mom." She stopped at the threshold, glaring at me with pure hatred. "Make sure you tell Tasha I am changing the locks, so do not bother trying to use the spare key to plant anything else." I slammed the door in her face and locked the deadbolt. Then I slid the chain across. I leaned against the door, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. I was alone. My apartment was destroyed, my job was gone. My mother hated me. But for the first time in my life, I felt free. I had nothing left to lose, and that meant I was ready to fight. The isolation did not happen all at once. It happened, notification by notification, vibrating in my pocket like a warning beat. Tasha did not just want me gone, she wanted me erased, and she knew exactly how to do it, using the most powerful weapon in our community. The church gossip mill. I opened Instagram, and there it was. A black and white photo of Tasha, looking out a rainy window, her hands clasped in prayer. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. "It is so heartbreaking when you have to cut off a family member to protect your own peace," she wrote. "I have tried so hard to help my sister find the light, but her jealousy and instability have become a danger to my family. Please pray for her and pray for us as we navigate this." Betrayal. Hashtag toxic family. Hashtag pray for Maya. The comments section was a firing squad. My Aunt Sarah, who had taught me how to braid hair, wrote, "Stay strong. Baby girl, God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers." Mrs. Gable, the head of the church choir, commented, "We are all behind you, Tasha. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can." My own cousins, people I had babysat, people I had tutored, were liking the post and commenting heart emojis, blocking me before I could even defend myself. It was a digital shunning, a modern-day stoning conducted with hashtags and filters. I went to the grocery store later that afternoon, wearing a hoodie pulled low. But it did not help. I ran into Deacon Miller in the produce aisle, a man I had known since I was 5 years old. I smiled instinctively, ready to say hello. He looked right through me, his eyes sliding over my face like I was a ghost. He turned his cart around and walked the other way without a word. The message was clear. I was the villain in Tasha's story and in this town. Tasha's story was the gospel truth. My phone, which used to buzz with group chats and family updates, went silent. The silence was loud, heavy, and suffocating. It felt like being buried alive. I sat on my floor amidst the broken glass of my life, feeling the crushing weight of loneliness. It felt like the walls were closing in, like the entire world had turned its back on me, simply because I dared to tell the truth. But then my phone lit up. It was not a hate comment. It was Ray. "I'm outside," he said, his voice rough and steady. "I brought food, and your grandfather wants to talk to you." I looked out the window and saw his battered truck idling at the curb. Beside him in the passenger seat sat Otis, looking frail but fierce. They were the only two people left in my corner, a disgraced detective and a betrayed old man. But as I walked out to meet them, I realized something important. An army of two honest men is worth more than a legion of liars. I was lonely, yes, but for the first time, I was not alone in the truth. I met Layla at a hole-in-the-wall barbecue joint in West End, where the ribs were smoky and the vinyl booths were deep enough to hide secrets. Layla was not just an old college roommate. She was the youngest assistant district attorney in Fulton County history, and she had a reputation for eating white-collar criminals for breakfast. When I slid into the booth opposite her, I felt small and broken, but Layla just looked at me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing and asked for the file. I laid it all out for her: the forged signature, the shell company, the Cayman accounts, the cease and desist order. Layla read through Ray's dossier in silence, her expression hardening with every page. When she finished the flight itinerary, showing Brad one-way ticket to Paris, she closed the folder and took a long sip of her iced tea. "This is not just family drama, Maya," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is a masterclass in financial predation, wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, money laundering. He is checking every box on the federal indictment bingo card." "But can we stop him?" I asked, desperation clawing at my throat. "He leaves in less than 3 weeks. Layla, if he gets on that plane, he is gone forever." Layla tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the table. "I cannot file charges based on what we have right now, not fast enough to stop him. It is all circumstantial. The LLC is in your name. The bank transfer was authorized by your grandfather, even if he was manipulated. Brad is smart. He has insulated himself. If we go to the police now, he will claim he was just a consultant and Tasha went rogue. He will throw your sister under the bus and fly away with the cash. We need something undeniable. We need a confession." We went back to Ray House, where Grandpa Otis was waiting. The four of us sat around the small desk, staring at the evidence board Ray had constructed. It looked like a map of a war zone. Otis looked at Layla, a flicker of hope in his tired eyes. "Can you help us?" he asked. "I am doing this pro bono," Layla said firmly, "because nobody messes with my friends and nobody steals from their grandfathers on my watch. But here is the problem. We know he did it. We know he is leaving. But we need him to say it. We need him to admit that he is taking control of the estate, not to protect it, but to liquidate it." We need a wiretap or a recorded confession that connects him directly to the intent to defraud. Ray leaned forward, his eyes scanning the flowchart on the screen. He is arrogant. Arrogant. Men like to brag. They like to feel like they are the smartest person in the room. If we can get him comfortable, if we can get him to think he has already won. Otis smiled a slow, grim smile that chilled the room. Then we give him exactly what he wants. We give him the keys to the kingdom. We make him feel like a king. And when a king thinks he is safe on his throne, that is when he lets his guard down. We need to set the stage. And I know exactly how to bait the trap. Otis picked up the phone in Ray's kitchen, his hand steady, despite the tremors he was about to fake. He dialed Brad's number, put it on speaker, and waited. When Brad answered, his tone was brisk and dismissive. Otis? What is it? I am in a meeting. Otis let out a long, ragged sigh, the sound of a man defeated by time and circumstance. Brad? He croaked, his voice trembling perfectly. I am sorry to bother you, son. But I can't find my glasses, and I can't remember where I put the deed to the lake house. Everything is getting so fuzzy lately. I am scared, Brad. I think it is time. There was a pause on the other end, a silence filled with calculation. Then Brad's voice changed, softening into that oily, fake concern that made my skin crawl. Time for what, Otis? Are you okay? Time to let go, Otis whispered. You were right. The taxes, the paperwork. It is too much for me. I am tired, Brad. I just want to rest. I want to go to that assisted living facility in Buckhead, the one with the garden. I want to sign the papers, the conservatorship, everything. I want you to take care of it all. I watched Ray and Layla exchange a look. It was working. Brad wasn't just listening, he was salivating. That is a very wise decision, Otis, Brad said, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice. It is for the best. We can protect the assets, make sure you are comfortable. When do you want to do this? Christmas Eve, Otis said. At the party. I want everyone to know. I want the family to see that I am making the right choice. Bring the papers, Brad. I will sign them after dinner. Just promise me you will take care of Tasha, and Maya too if you can. Of course, Otis, Brad lied smoothly. We will take care of everyone. Don't worry about a thing. I will have the lawyers draft the final version tonight. You just rest. We will handle everything. Brad hung up, and Otis set the phone down, his trembling ceasing instantly. He looked at us with a shark-like grin. He took the bait, Otis said, hook, line, and sinker. Ray pulled up Tasha's Instagram feed on the big monitor. 10 minutes later, a new post appeared. It was a photo of Tasha and Brad clinking champagne glasses in their living room, a bottle of Dom Perignon on the table. The caption read, Big things coming, so blessed to have a husband who takes care of everything. Hatch empire building #legacy. They were celebrating. They were toasting to their victory, to the fortune they thought was finally theirs. They had no idea they were drinking to their own execution. Brad thought he had manipulated a senile old man into handing over the keys to the kingdom. He didn't know that the old man had just locked the gates and was waiting to drop the portcullis on his head. Ray tracked Jessica Miller down at an upscale smoothie bar in Buckhead, where the kale cost more than a minimum wage hourly rate. She was sitting by the window, tapping on her phone, wearing workout clothes that looked like they had never seen a drop of sweat. She looked exactly like Tasha, just 10 years younger and with less desperation in her eyes. Ray slid into the seat opposite her, placing his badge on the table, not aggressively, but with enough weight to make the ice in her drink rattle. Jessica Miller, he asked, his voice calm and level. I suggest you do not make a scene because the conversation we are about to have is going to determine whether you spend next year in Paris or in a federal penitentiary. Jessica froze, her eyes darting to the badge, then to Ray. Face. Who are you? She hissed, keeping her voice low. Are you with Tasha? Brad told me she was crazy and might send people to harass me. I am not with Tasha, Ray said, leaning in. I am with the truth. And the truth is that your Brad Peterson is currently in the process of embezzling $10 million from a senile 80-year-old man. And according to my records, he booked the getaway flight using your credit card and your frequent flyer account. Do you know what the FBI calls that, Jessica? They call it conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. You are looking at 20 years minimum. Jessica's face went pale, the color draining away instantly. He told me it was his bonus, she stammered. He said he was cashing out his partnership equity and we were starting fresh, he said. Tasha was bleeding him dry, and he just needed to get what was rightfully his. Ray laughed a dry, humorless sound. He does not have equity. Jessica. He was fired 6 months ago for insider trading. He is broke. He is stealing this money to pay off loan sharks, and he is using you as the mule. If he gets caught at the airport, who do you think is going to take the fall? The guy with the silver tongue or the girl whose name is on the flight? Manifest. He watched the realization wash over her. It was not just fear, it was humiliation. She realized she was not the love of his life. She was just another asset, another tool in his con. Ray pressed harder, sliding a photo across the table. It was a picture of Brad and Tasha from just 2 days ago, kissing at a restaurant. He told you he was moved out, right? Ray asked. But here he is, playing the loving husband to get access to the grandfather bank accounts. He is lying to her. He is lying to you, and the moment he lands in France, he will probably dump you for a newer model once the cash is secure. Jessica stared at the photo, her hands trembling. She looked up at Ray, and the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp fury. She unlocked her phone and spun it around on the table. "Open the email app," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "The confirmation code is right at the top. Delta Airlines Flight 84 to Paris. Charles de Gaulle, departing December 26th at 10 p.m. One-way tickets for Mr. Bradley Peterson and Ms. Jessica Miller." "I want immunity," she said, her eyes burning into Ray. "I will give you everything. The texts where he talks about hiding the money, the emails where he tells me to open the offshore accounts. I want him to rot. He promised me the world, and he was going to send me to jail instead. Take it all. I hope you bury him." Ray called me over to the desk again, his face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights of his garage office. "I thought we had seen the bottom of the barrel with the airline tickets and the mistress, but apparently Brad had brought a shovel and kept digging." Ray slid a document across the desk, his hand resting on it for a moment, as if he hesitated to show me the carnage underneath. "Take a breath, Maya," he warned. "You are not going to like this." I looked down at the paper. It was a property lien filed 3 weeks ago against a residential address I recognized instantly. 105 Maple Drive, my parents' house. The sprawling brick mansion where I grew up. The house my mother treated like a museum. The house that was the cornerstone of their identity, according to this document, was no longer theirs. It had been leveraged as collateral for a high-interest short-term loan from a private equity firm that sounded less like a bank and more like a front for organized crime. The loan amount was staggering, $2 million. And right there at the bottom of the page was the signature of the borrower, Harold Williams, my father. I stared at the ink. The slant was close, the pressure was similar, but I knew my father's handwriting better than anyone. I had forged his signature on report cards in middle school, enough times to know the tells. The loop on the H was too wide. The spacing between the first and last name was too tight. It was a forgery. A good one, but a forgery nonetheless. "Brad used daddy identity," I whispered, the horror rising in my throat. "He stole the deed to their house and mortgaged it behind their backs. Mom and Dad have no idea, Ray. They think their house is paid off. They think they are secure. If Brad defaults on this, which we know he will, because he is leaving the country, the lenders will foreclose. My parents will be homeless." My hand instinctively reached for my phone. I had to call them. I had to warn them. My mother was awful. My father was weak, but they were still my parents. They were about to lose the roof over their heads because of a monster they had welcomed into their home. I unlocked the screen, my thumb hovering over Mom. Contact name. "Don't do it," Ray said softly. He did not try to stop me. He just watched me with sad understanding. "If you call them now, what happens? Maya, will they believe you? Or will Vivian scream that you are jealous again? Will she say, 'You forged the document to frame Brad? You know how this plays out?'" I froze. The memory of the slap burned on my cheek. The sound of my mother telling me she wished I wasn't her daughter echoed in my ears. She had chosen Tasha. She had chosen the lie over the truth, time and time again. If I called her now, she would just accuse me of trying to ruin Christmas. She would tip off Brad and he would run before we could trap him. And if he ran, Grandpa lost everything. I lowered the phone, my heart hardening into a stone in my chest. "They made this bed," I said, my voice sounding cold even to my own ears. "They invited him in. They gave him the keys. They belittled me and worshipped him because he looked the part. If I warn them now, I save them from the pain. But I lose the war. I cannot let Brad get away, just to spare my mother feelings. She needs to see this, Ray. She needs to see the eviction notice. She needs to see the sheriff standing on her porch before she will ever believe that her golden boy is a thief." I put the phone down on the desk, turning the screen over so I could not see their faces. Smiling in the background. Wallpaper. It was the hardest decision of my life, but it was necessary. Silence was my only weapon now. I would not warn them. I would not save them, not yet. They wanted a perfect Christmas Eve. They were going to get one. And when the clock struck midnight, the carriage was going to turn back into a pumpkin, and they were going to have to look at the rot inside. My parents were about to learn a very expensive lesson about trust, and I was going to be the one to teach it to them. The laptop screen glowed in the semi-darkness of my apartment, casting long shadows against the bare walls, where my family photos used to hang. I sat there for hours, organizing the digital ammunition Ray and Layla had compiled into a single, lethal presentation. Folder A contained the bank statements showing the wire transfer to the fake LLC. Folder B held the shell company registry from the Cayman Islands showing Brad as the sole owner. Folder C was the kill shot, the flight itinerary for Brad and Jessica, and the foreclosure notice on my parents' house. I dragged each file into the slide deck with a grim satisfaction. It did not feel like I was making a PowerPoint. It felt like I was loading bullets into a chamber. Click, click, click. Once the USB drive was secured in my purse, I turned my attention to the physical transformation. For 30 years, I had been Maya the music teacher, Maya the mouse, Maya who wore beige cardigans and sensible shoes to blend into the background, Maya who apologized for taking up space, but that Maya died the moment my mother wished me out of the family. The woman who was going to walk into that Christmas Eve party tonight was someone else entirely. I had drained the last $400 from my savings account to buy the dress. It was reckless, considering I was unemployed and facing eviction, but I did not care. This was not a garment. It was armor. It was a floor-length gown of silk chiffon, a red so deep and vibrant it looked like fresh arterial blood. It was a violent color, a color that screamed for attention, a color that said, "I am here and I am dangerous." I pulled it on the fabric, cool and slippery against my skin-hugging curves I usually hid, showing skin I usually covered. I stood before the bathroom mirror and applied my makeup with the precision of a surgeon. No more soft pinks and natural tones. I lined my eyes with sharp black wings that could cut glass and painted my lips a crimson shade that matched the dress. When I stepped back, I did not recognize the reflection staring back at me. The sad, tired teacher was gone. In her place stood a warrior queen, ready to burn the kingdom to the ground. I pulled my hair back into a severe, elegant bun, exposing my neck and my jawline, which was set hard as granite. I slipped into the high heels that added 3 inches to my height. 3 inches of leverage. I would need to look Brad in the eye as I destroyed him. I grabbed my clutch, the one holding the USB drive and the portable projector remote. My hands were not shaking. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm of anticipation. They were expecting the victim. They were expecting the disgraced sister to show up begging for forgiveness or to stay away entirely. They were expecting silence. They had no idea I was bringing the storm. I checked the time. It was 7 o'clock. The party had started, the champagne was flowing, the lies were being toasted. I took a deep breath, turned off the lights, and walked out into the cold December night. I was not going to a party, I was going to an execution, and I was dressed for the occasion. The driveway of my parents' estate looked like a showroom for a luxury car dealership lined with Bentleys, Mercedes, and the occasional Rolls-Royce glimmering under the frost. Inside the house was a masterclass in performative wealth. The air smelled of fresh pine, expensive scotch, and the heavy perfume of old money. A jazz quartet played soft, innocuous holiday tunes in the corner, providing the soundtrack for the lie being spun in the center of the room. Brad stood by the limestone fireplace holding court like a feudal lord receiving tribute. He wore a velvet tuxedo jacket that probably cost more than my annual rent. One hand casually resting on the mantel, the other swirling a glass of amber liquid. He was laughing, that rich, booming laugh that made people feel lucky just to be near him. Surrounding him were the pillars of Atlanta, black elite, the pastors of megachurches, the partners of law firms, and the tech entrepreneurs. They hung on his every word, unaware that they were listening to a man who had pawned his watch to buy the hors d'oeuvres. Tasha drifted through the crowd in a gold-sequined gown, a walking advertisement for a life she could not afford. She played the hostess perfectly, touching arms, filling glasses, and accepting compliments on a home she did not own and a success she had not earned. Then the heavy oak front doors swung open, letting in a gust of biting winter air. The conversation did not stop immediately. It died in waves starting near the entrance and rolling across the room until the only sound was the popping of a log in the fireplace and the confused faltering of the saxophone player. I stood framed in the archway, a splash of crimson violence in a sea of black tuxedos and gold sequins. The red silk dress clung to me like a second skin, the slit riding high up my thigh, the neckline plunging low, daring anyone to look away. I had shed the skin of the meek schoolteacher. I held my head high, my dark lips curved into a smile that was not a smile, but a warning. A ripple of whispers moved through the room. "Is that Maya? She looks incredible. I thought she was the quiet one." My mother cut through the crowd like an icebreaker, her face a mask of furious disbelief. She marched up to me, her hands clenched at her sides, her eyes darting around to see who was watching. "What are you doing here?" Vivian hissed, her voice a venomous whisper, meant only for me. "You are not welcome here, Maya. You are a stain on this evening, and I will not let you ruin your sister moment. Get out before I have security drag you out." I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked down at her, feeling a strange sense of pity for this woman who cared more about the opinion of strangers than the soul of her child. "I am here to see Grandpa," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the hushed room, "and I think he wants to see me." "Let her stay," a voice quavered from the corner near the Christmas tree. The crowd parted to reveal Otis sitting in a wheelchair, a tartan blanket over his knees, looking small and frail, playing the part of the invalid perfectly. He raised a trembling hand. "It is Christmas. Vivian, let the girl stay. She is family after all." Brad walked over, smiling that shark smile, putting a possessive arm around my mother's shoulders. "It is okay, Vivian," he said magnanimously, playing the benevolent patriarch. "Let her stay. It shows we are the bigger people." Besides looking at me with cold, dead eyes, "I think Maya is going to learn a lot tonight." I met his gaze and my smile widened, just a fraction. You have no idea, Brad. I thought, gripping my clutch tighter. I walked past them, the silk of my dress rustling like dry leaves, entering the lion den with the weapon that would kill the beast tucked safely under my arm. The waiters cleared the remnants of the prime rib and truffle mash, moving with the silent efficiency of ghosts, leaving behind only half-empty wine glasses and the heavy scent of expensive cigars. The room was warm, thick with the smell of pine and satisfaction. This was the moment Brad had been waiting for, the crescendo of his performance. He stood up, tapping a crystal spoon against his champagne flute, the sharp ring silencing the room instantly. He adjusted his velvet tuxedo jacket and walked to the head of the table where Otis sat slumped in his wheelchair, looking small and defeated under the weight of the tartan blanket. Brad placed a hand on the old man's shoulder, a gesture that looked protective to the audience, but felt like ownership to me. Family, friends, honored guests, he began, his voice dripping with a rehearsed humility that made my stomach turn. We all know how hard Otis has worked to build this legacy. He started with a shovel and a dream, and he built an empire. But heavy is the head that wears the crown. Lately, we have seen the toll it takes. The confusion, the stress, the forgotten dates. It is too much for one man, especially at his age. He signaled to Tasha, who reached into her designer bag and handed him the blue leather-bound folder we had seen in the study. He laid it on the table, smoothing it out like a sacred text. I do not want you to worry about taxes or lawyers or market fluctuations ever again. Otis, Brad said softly, pitching his voice so it carried to the back of the room. I want you to rest. I want you to enjoy your golden years without the burden of administration. I am ready to carry this weight for you. This conservatorship just says that I will handle the headaches so you can enjoy the sunset. It is the least I can do for the man who gave us everything. Vivian leaned in, her eyes gleaming with a greed masquerading as concern. Sign it, Daddy, she urged, pushing a gold Mont Blanc fountain pen into his trembling hand. It is for the best. Brad is a financial wizard. He will double the estate in a year. You owe it to your grandchildren to let him protect our future. Do not be stubborn. Do it for us. Across the table, Tasha held her phone up, the ring light reflecting in her eyes like predatory stars. She was live streaming the event to her 50,000 followers. I could see the comments scrolling by on her screen. Hearts, clapping hands, fire emojis, hashtag generational wealth. She was broadcasting the theft of her own inheritance to thousands of strangers, convinced she was documenting a coronation. Otis looked at the pen, then at the paper. His hand shook violently, the nib hovering over the signature line. He looked up at Brad with wide, watery eyes, playing the part of the confused lamb to perfection. You will take care of everything? He asked, his voice cracking. You promise you will keep the money safe? I promise, Brad said, and I saw the hunger in his eyes, a naked, ravenous need that almost broke through his mask. He was so close. He could practically taste the $10 million. All he needed was a little bit of ink on the page. The room held its breath, waiting for the scratch of the pen that would seal our fate. The tip of the gold fountain pen touched the paper, leaving a tiny dot of ink that looked like a period at the end of a sentence. The entire room seemed to lean forward in unison, sucked in by the gravity of the moment. Tasha was holding her breath, her phone steady in her hand, capturing the exact second her financial problems would disappear. Vivian was practically vibrating with anticipation, her eyes locked on the signature line as if she could will the ink to flow by telekinesis. Brad stood like a statue, his hand resting heavily on Otis' shoulder, a benevolent jailer waiting for the prisoner to lock his own cell. But the pen did not move. Otis froze. His hand, which had been trembling with such convincing senility just moments ago, suddenly went still. He lifted the pen from the paper and sat back in his wheelchair, letting out a long, contemplative sigh. He looked up at Brad and then out at the room, his eyes clearing instantly, the fog of age evaporating to reveal the sharp iron gaze of the man who had built skyscrapers. Actually, he said, his voice strong and steady, losing the tremor completely. Before I sign away my legacy, I think I would like to see my Christmas present from Maya. The silence that followed was heavy and confused. Vivian let out a sharp, exasperated noise like a deflating tire. Daddy, really? Now we are in the middle of something important. Maya can give you her little gift later after the paperwork is done. No, Otis said firmly, crossing his arms over his chest. I want to see it now. She told me she made a video, a tribute to the family history. I think it is appropriate. Don't you, Brad? Since we are talking about legacy, Brad? Jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. He remembered the coffee shop. He remembered the recorder in the water. He thought he had disarmed me. He thought I was beaten. But the calm look on my face unsettled him. He forced a tight smile that looked more like a grimace. Of course, Otis. If it means that much to you. Let us watch Maya. Little video. I stepped forward, the red silk of my dress flowing around me like liquid fire. I felt the eyes of every guest on me, judging the disgraced teacher, the black sheep. But I did not care. I walked to the massive 80-inch flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace, the modern altar of the house. I pulled my phone from my clutch and tapped the screen, connecting it to the wireless casting system. It will just take a second, I said, my voice light and pleasant, contrasting sharply with the pounding of my heart. I put together a collection of memories, some old, some very new. I think you are all going to find it very illuminating. The screen flickered to life, transitioning from the idle family photos to a black screen mirroring my phone. Brad took a step forward, a sudden realization dawning on him. He saw the way I was standing. He saw the lack of fear in my eyes, and his survival instinct kicked in. He opened his mouth to stop me, to make up some excuse about the Wi-Fi or the time, but he was too late. I tapped the play button, and the room was filled with the sound of his own voice, crisp and clear, booming from the surround sound speakers. The giant screen did not show a montage of Christmas memories or a tribute to Grandpa Otis. Instead, it displayed a stark, high-contrast banking flowchart that cut through the festive lighting like a forensic searchlight. The first slide was titled simply, "The Truth About the Wire Transfer." It was brutal in its simplicity. On the left side was Grandpa Otis' savings account with a red arrow pointing to a transaction dated November 14th for $500,000. The middle column showed the recipient, Maya Music, LLC, the fake company they had pinned on me. But it was the third column that made the room gasp. The arrow did not stop at Maya Music, LLC. It bounced immediately to an offshore entity called Blue Water Holdings, based in the Cayman Islands. And right underneath the company name in bold, unignorable letters, was the beneficial owner, Bradley J. Peterson. I narrated the slide, my voice cutting through the stunned silence like a knife. As you can see, the money never went to a music center. It never went to charity. It went through a shell company registered in my name to hide the trail and landed squarely in a private account that only one person in this room can access. I looked at Brad. He was frozen, his champagne glass tilting dangerously in his hand, his face draining of blood until he looked like a wax figure melting under the heat of the spotlight. The jazz band had stopped playing. The waiters had stopped moving. Every pair of eyes in the room shifted from the screen to the man in the velvet tuxedo who was suddenly shrinking in his expensive shoes. I did not give him time to recover. I tapped my phone and the screen wiped to the next slide. This one was even more personal. On one side was a scanned copy of a termination letter from Apex Capital dated 6 months ago. The words, "Termination for cause and insider trading," were highlighted in bright yellow. On the other side was a credit report summary for Tasha showing $80,000 in credit card debt and a credit score that was in free fall. The collective gasp from the room sucked the oxygen right out of the air. These were the elite of Atlanta. They knew what insider trading meant. They knew what debt looked like. The illusion of the power couple, the golden boy, and the socialite princess shattered instantly, leaving behind two desperate grifters in fancy clothes. That was the moment Tasha snapped. The humiliation was too much for her to bear. She shrieked a high-pitched sound of pure animal panic and lunged toward the television, her sequins flashing like distress signals. "Turn it off!" she screamed, clawing at the air as if she could physically rip the image off the screen. "It is a lie. It is all fake, Maya. Photoshopped it. She is trying to frame us." She stood in front of the TV, spreading her arms wide, trying to block the evidence with her body, but the projection just cast the damning numbers right onto her gold dress, branding her with her own debt. She looked wild, her eyes manic, tears streaming down her face, destroying her perfect makeup. "Mom, tell them," she wailed, looking at Vivian, who was staring at the screen with her mouth open, a look of absolute horror on her face. "Tell them Maya is crazy. Tell them we are rich." But nobody was looking at Tasha. They were looking at the receipts. The murmurs started low and angry. I heard the word fraud whispered by a bishop. I heard the word disgusting hissed by a judge. The court of public opinion had reached a verdict in record time and there was no appeal. I tapped the screen again, and the room went deadly silent as the debt figures vanished, replaced by a Delta Airlines itinerary that projected crisp and clear above the fireplace. This was the slide that turned the financial crime into a personal tragedy. The flight details were magnified large enough for everyone in the back row to read Flight 84 to Paris, departing December 26th at 10 p.m., one way. But it was the passenger list that drew the collective gasp from the room. Passenger 1, Mr. Bradley Peterson. Passenger 2, Ms. Jessica Miller. Tasha stopped screaming. She stood there in front of the screen, the name Jessica Miller projected across her chest in glowing white letters. The realization hit her, not like a slap, but like a bullet. She turned slowly to look at her husband, her hands trembling by her sides. "Brad," she whispered, her voice small and broken. "Who is Jessica Miller? You told me we were going to Paris. You said it was a second honeymoon, just for us. You said you bought the tickets for Mr. and Mrs. Peterson." Brad did not answer. He could not look at her. He was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched tight, the veins in his neck bulging. He was not the confident tycoon anymore. He was a cornered rat caught in the glare of the truth. Tasha looked from him to the screen and back. Again, and I saw the light go out of her eyes. She realized in that moment that she was not his partner in crime. She was his mark. He had used her credit, used her name, and used her trust to fund his escape with another woman. She was not the queen of the empire. She was just the bag holder left behind to face the ruin he created. But I was not done. I had one final arrow in my quiver, and it was aimed straight at the woman who had called me a disgrace. I swiped to the final slide, and a property lien document filled the screen. 105 Maple Drive. The address of the house we were standing in right now. The document showed a high-interest loan for $2 million secured against the property taken out 3 weeks ago, and at the bottom was a signature that purported to be my father's, but was clearly a forgery. "This is the mortgage deed to this house," I announced, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Brad forged my father's signature to borrow $2 million from a predatory lender. "He took the equity out of your home, Mom. He took the roof over your head. The loan is already in default. When he gets on that plane in 2 days, the bank is coming to take the keys." My mother stared at the screen, her eyes bulging as she tried to comprehend the words. Her beautiful home, her status symbol, her sanctuary. It was gone. She looked at Brad, the son-in-law. She had worshipped the man she had defended, the man she had sold her own jewelry to support. She looked at the signature that mocked her husband's name, and then the reality crashed down on her with the weight of a collapsing building. She let out a sound that was not a scream, but a low guttural wail of pure despair. Her knees gave way and she crumpled to the floor, her designer dress pooling around her like a shroud. "Vivian," my father cried, rushing to catch her, but he was too slow. She hit the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching her chest as if her heart had physically broken. She had lost everything: her money, her house, her pride, and her family. She had sacrificed me to protect a monster, and now the monster had devoured her whole. I stood over them, the red silk of my dress blazing in the light, and felt no triumph, only a cold, hollow finality. The truth was out, and it had destroyed them all, just as I warned it would. The silence in the room shattered instantly, as Tasha unleashed a scream that sounded like it tore her throat apart. It was the sound of a woman watching her entire reality dissolve into ash. She did not cry. She detonated. She threw her champagne glass at Brad, head missing him by inches and shattering against the marble fireplace. Then she launched herself at him, her manicured nails. The ones she had just used to show off her engagement ring became weapons aimed at his eyes. "You liar!" she shrieked, clawing at his velvet lapels, tearing the fabric. "You promised me Paris. You promised me the world. Who is she? Who is Jessica Miller?" Brad stumbled back, his hands coming up to protect his face from the whirlwind of gold. Sequins and fury, that was his wife. He looked terrified, not of the police, but of the sheer unadulterated rage of a woman scorned. He grabbed her wrists, trying to restrain her, but she was fueled by the adrenaline of total humiliation. She kicked him, her heel catching him in the shin, and for a second the guests watched in horrified fascination as the perfect couple. The idols of the community tore each other apart in the middle of the living room. "Get off me, you crazy witch!" Brad roared, losing all pretense of civility. He shoved her hard with both hands. It was a violent, brutal push that sent Tasha flying backward. She crashed into the 12-foot Christmas tree, sending ornaments shattering to the floor and tangling herself in the lights. She lay there amidst the broken glass and pine needles, gasping for air, her wig askew, her dignity completely destroyed. Brad did not check on her. He did not even look at her. He looked at the door. His eyes were wild, darting around the room like a trapped animal. He realized the walls were closing in, and his fight-or-flight instinct screamed, "Run!" He scrambled over the fallen decorations, ignoring the gasps of the guests, and bolted toward the heavy oak front doors, hoping to reach the driveway, hoping to reach the rental car, hoping to vanish before the net tightened. But the net had already closed. As Brad reached for the handle, the doors burst open with a force that shook the frame. Standing on the threshold was not a guest. It was Detective Ray, flanked by 4 agents in navy blue windbreakers emblazoned with the 3 letters that end all arguments: FBI. They stepped into the foyer, bringing the cold winter air and the heavy weight of federal authority with them. "Bradley Peterson." Ray announced, his voice cutting through the chaos like a gavel strike. "Step away from the door and put your hands where I can see them." Brad froze, his hand hovering inches from the brass handle. He looked at the agents, then back at the room full of people witnessing his downfall. He tried to summon one last lie, one last charm. "Offensive officer." He stammered, a sick smile plastered on his face. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding. My family is just having a little dispute. Save it for the judge," Brad Ray said, stepping forward and spinning him around violently. He kicked Brad's legs apart and slammed him against the wall, the sound echoing through the silent house. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it because you have talked enough." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting tight was the loudest sound in the world. Click, click, click. The metal bit into Brad's wrists, binding him to his crimes. He slumped against the wall, the fight draining out of him, leaving only a hollow shell of a man. Tasha pulled herself up from the wreckage of the Christmas tree, mascara running down her face in black rivers, looking at the agents with desperate hope. She thought they were her saviors. She thought they were here to punish the man who had betrayed her. She stumbled toward Ray, her hands out pleadingly. "Thank God," she sobbed. "He stole everything. He tricked me. He used my name. Officer, you have to arrest him. He ruined my life." An agent stepped forward, but instead of offering her a hand, he pulled a second pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Natasha Williams. Peterson," he said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "You are under arrest for forgery, identity theft, and aiding and abetting a federal crime. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Tasha stopped dead, her mouth falling open. "What?" she whispered. "No, no, I am the victim. He cheated on me. Look at the screen. He was leaving me. You signed the incorporation papers for the shell company." "Mrs. Peterson," the agent said, snapping the cuffs onto her wrists. "You forged your sister's signature on bank documents. You knowingly participated in the scheme to defraud your grandfather. Being a victim of your husband's infidelity does not give you immunity for your own crimes." Tasha screamed as the metal locked around her wrists, a high piercing sound of disbelief. She looked at Vivian, who was still sobbing on the floor. She looked at the guests, who were turning away in shame. And finally she looked at me, but I could not help her. She had made her choice with every signature, every lie, and every stolen dollar. As the agents marched them both out the front door past the Rolls-Royces, they would never drive again. The room fell into a heavy, stunned silence. The party was over, the empire had fallen, and all that was left was the truth. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers washed over the snow-covered driveway, turning the pristine white powder into a bruising shade of purple. The guests had fled, scattering like cockroaches when the lights came on, leaving only the ruin of a family behind. My mother. Vivian sat on the bottom step of the grand staircase, weeping into her hands. She looked small and broken, her expensive makeup smeared across her face like war paint. When she saw me walking toward the door, pushing Grandpa Otis in his wheelchair, she scrambled to her feet, desperate and pathetic. "Maya," she choked out, grabbing the fabric of my red silk dress with trembling hands. "You cannot leave us like this. The bank is going to take the house. You heard what Brad did. He mortgaged everything. You have to help us. You have the grandfather trust now. You can pay off the loan. We can fix this. We are family." I stopped and looked down at her hand, clutching my dress. The touch that used to make me desperate for approval now just felt cold. I gently but firmly peeled her fingers off the silk, stepping back to create a distance that was more than just physical. "You are right, Mom," I said, my voice steady and calm, like the surface of a deep frozen lake. "We are family." But I remember Thanksgiving. I remember standing on this porch while you told me I was not welcome. I remember you choosing your pride over your daughter. You made it very clear that this house was for successes only. Well, I am successful now, but this house is not my problem. You wanted the appearance of wealth at any cost. Now you have the bill. I did not wait for her to answer. I did not wait for her to scream or beg or apologize. I just turned my back on the woman who had birthed me, but never really saw me, and pushed my grandfather out into the cold, clear night. The air bit at my skin, but it felt good. It felt like cleansing. 6 months later, the sun was shining on the brick facade of the newly renovated warehouse in downtown Atlanta. The sign above the door read, "The Otis Williams Center for Music and Arts." "Grandpa?" Otis stood by the ribbon holding the giant scissors, his hands steady, his eyes bright with a joy I had not seen in decades. We had used the recovered funds not to buy yachts or jewelry, but to buy instruments for kids who could not afford them. The sound of a cello drifted from the open window, a sweet, mournful melody that signaled a new beginning. Justice had been served cold and hard. Brad was currently sitting in a 6x8 cell at a federal correctional facility, beginning year 1 of a 15-year sentence for wire fraud and money laundering. He had traded his Italian suits for an orange jumpsuit and his arrogance for a number. Tasha had avoided prison by turning state's evidence, but her punishment was perhaps even more fitting for someone so obsessed with image. She was serving 5 years of probation and working the drive-through window at a fast food joint near the highway. I drove past once, just to see. Her hair was tucked under a hairnet. Her designer nails were gone, and she looked miserable, handing a bag of greasy fries to a stranger. Her glittery life had turned to grease and regret. As for my parents, the bank took the mansion. They were living in a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, listening to their neighbors argue through thin walls, stripped of the status that defined them. They were alone with their shame. I climbed into my new car, a sleek black sedan that I had bought with my own salary. As the new director of the center, I gripped the leather steering wheel, feeling the engine hum to life under my hands. I looked in the rearview mirror, but I did not look back. At the past, I looked at myself. The mouse was gone. The victim was gone. I smiled, a smile that reached my eyes, shifted into gear, and drove forward into a life that was finally completely my own. The most profound lesson from this story is that true wealth is found in integrity, not in appearances. Maya's family, blinded by their obsession with status and materialism, fatally underestimated the quiet strength of the black sheep and the sharp mind of their grandfather. They built a fortress of lies on a foundation of greed, believing they were untouchable, but they forgot that the truth is patient. Ultimately, the story proves that while deception might grant a temporary advantage, character and resilience are the only currencies that hold their value when the house of cards finally collapses. If you have ever had to stand alone to stand up for what is right, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where the underdog finally bites back.